Hey guys, Pete here. Mr. Robot Season 4 is officially underway. This will be my recap and review of Episode 1, which is titled Unauthorized. If you haven't watched it, this will definitely contain spoilers about everything we saw in Episode 1, and speculation about where Mr. Robot's 4th season, which is its final season, is heading. There were a lot of things that jumped out as being unique to this season, which I'll point out as we go. The big thing for me, though, was it feels like the end. In a series that's always presented new mysteries at every turn, this episode was the first one that truly felt like we were headed towards definitive answers. The previously on segment, the recap that gets us set up for what we need for where things left off, it blends right into the first scene here, and it's a doozy. It's an end in of itself, the end of Angela's character. We pick up right where we left off in the season 3 finale with her talking to her biological father, Phillip Price. They're talking about Whiterose. We learn that Price is actually trying to talk her down. He's trying to get her to move on, accept that she's been conned, take it in stride, go back and try to lead a life that doesn't involve fighting back against Whiterose. She does mention that she's seen Whiterose's project, but that ends up feeling unimportant, and what really sold this sequence for me were the performances. Those of us who've been following everything closely, all the preseason clips and reading the articles that came out ahead of time, pretty much figured out this is ultimately where Angela's story would end. And to be honest, I didn't love the idea when it started to feel inevitable. Both Portia Doubleday and Michael Christopher delivered a scene that makes it work. The Angela moment that stood out for me was when she sees her executioners off screen. She knows what will happen, she accepts her situation, and it hits in a way that I hadn't guessed it might when contemplating her dying so early in the season. For Price, it's as he's walking away. He starts off stumbling, and then we watch his rage build as he walks off. He rips off the wire. There's a nice sound effect here with the glitch in the sound as he pulls it, and we learn that he's complicit whether he was trying to protect his daughter or not. It all underlines the idea that Whiterose is pretty much unstoppable. That carries on where we see him grieving in the next scene, and like I said, it's not an ideal ending for her, but it is a great looking scene. I like the way they put it together. Rip Angela, you'll be missed. We get Whiterose's introduction to season 4 as she calls Price. They talk on the phone. After they talk, we learn that there's a holdup. Elliot's solution is going to take 2 months before they can get the shipping to the Congo. Whiterose tells her assistant that she wants to send a reminder to him to let him know what's at stake. We see later in a quick flash that it's a picture of Angela's dead body. And then we get our jump in time as the camera zooms past Whiterose. We see it come into New York at Christmastime. The camera work looks slightly different in season 4. There's still plenty that gives it its signature look, but they've added some tricks to their bag as far as I can tell. I really liked the opening credits look with the out of focus bits there, and thought this whole opening few minutes looked pretty fantastic. We end up in a lawyer's office at a Christmas party. We get introduced to a new character who has a pretty short run as far as things are concerned. Freddie Lomax, he gets a package. And while this is a really fun scene to watch, and it's a reminder of how good Elliot is at doing what he does, I don't think we need to talk about it too much in the recap other than we see that Elliot's driven, he's focused, he's trying to take down Whiterose. He's got this guy who's a lawyer, he gets his inbox, he finds out where Whiterose's banking is done. We also see that because he gets this name, that there's more going on. While Elliot's really focused in taking care of business and he lays this plan really well until Lomax kills himself, the fact that he gave him a name that turns out to be a honeypot later on shows that it's not like Elliot's flying completely under the radar. Obviously, the Dark Army was following him there, and yeah, you get the idea. There's a lot going on behind the scenes on both sides, and we don't know what's going on with Elliot because he won't tell us. We get a couple quick glimpses of other characters and where they're at after the season 3 finale. Tyrell is basically a hero at this point. We had a shot in the taxi ride over showing that the economy has bounced back. Everybody's excited about that. Tyrell being the CTO of E-Corp's in a good spot. He looks like he's not really having that much fun taking on that life though. His existence looks a bit meaningless perhaps compared to what he thought he was doing before. We see Dom looking really paranoid and beat up at her mom's place. We could see that she's been drinking. We go to the All Safe building, which looks like that is the new arcade, if you will, and we see that F Society is basically now just Elliot, although he's working hand in hand with Mr. Robot. We saw this really well in the Grand Central scene, and we just see it throughout this episode. They're working together. They're not at odds. At All Safe, we see that Mr. Robot's at the computer. He's going through the social media accounts of this John Garson character. Elliot's got his own private conspiracy stringboard kind of thing going on with post-it notes on the office windows. We realize that Elliot is in a hurry because there's not that much time. Mr. Robot is the voice of reason here. He warns him that he's making it too personal. He's acting out of anger. And Elliot gives us a pretty good monologue about how people are forgetting, how they're exhausted. He's exhausted too. Darlene comes in. She's obviously using drugs. She's out of her mind. She believes she saw Angela. Elliot knows this is not possible, so he doesn't really want to deal with Darlene. He's seen the photos of Angela's dead body. And as viewers, we get Mr. Robot coming and talking to us, which he doesn't usually do. He tells us that Elliot is shutting us out. He's basically shutting everyone out. And we can see that dynamic of Elliot being the voice of reason, that has basically flipped. Elliot decides to go to Garson's office. He's going to deliver a package that's going to get him access to the Wi-Fi there. When they get there, it's obviously set up. It's a honeypot. He doesn't figure this out until it's too late. As viewers, we get the idea a little bit faster because it's obviously set up. Nobody's there. They're looking around. It doesn't look like anybody's ever really worked there. Mr. Robot says in the hall as they're approaching that this is the quietest building in Manhattan. I like the quirkiness here. The man at the counter eating Fruity Pebbles. We have another character talking loudly, like FaceTiming someone on the phone in a different language that we can't understand. And after Elliot gets himself caught, we hear the guy at the counter fire up "Don't Worry, Be Happy" on his iPod, and that plays through the halls. It continues playing as Elliot is dragged away by two men, and he's kicking and shouting as they go. Back out in New Jersey, we meet the new character Janice at Dom's place. Her mom thinks she's invited Janice over to possibly set her up with Dom, but we learn that Janice is actually the one pulling the strings here. She comes off as nerdy and harmless at dinner, then does this 180 and reveals her true colors when they're all alone outside. Janice tells Dom that she's going to have to wake up in the morning and go do the interview about the Santiago case because that mess needs to be cleaned up. She promises that she's going to have to do something very bad to her mother if it's not taken care of. Dom tries to threaten Janice, but it's made clear that if she does something to her, then someone else is just going to step up and take her place. After she makes that clear, Janice leaves, and Dom's reality is exactly what we thought it would be at the end of last season. We get one more look at Darlene, how she's trying to medicate herself through the pain of losing Angela. She's staying in Angela's apartment, getting loaded, and we see her throw everyone out and then collapse onto the bed crying with Angela's ballet shoes. Back at his apartment, Elliot is actually being held down by those guys who kidnapped him. As they tie a tourniquet around his arm, we see a third man prepare a lethal dose of heroin to inject in him. The man preparing the shot is actually showrunner Sam Esmail doing a cameo. He's had small cameos in previous seasons, but here he plays a pretty substantial part. When Elliot implores for him to say something, he just says "goodbye, friend" before he gives him the hot shot. I wondered if the drug scene might be related to a forced overdose in my trailer breakdown for season 4, and that turned out to be the case. Only I never thought that Elliot would actually die. After struggling and then seeing a vision of his family that includes his mom and himself as a kid, he does indeed overdose and go out though. The screen fades to black and the credits start. But, of course, this isn't the end of Elliot's story. It's the opening episode of the end of the series, and in a power move, Esmail's character revives our hero with Narcan. He inhales with a deep breath, and he springs back to life. We find out that these guys work for Phillip Price, who accompanies him back inside the room, and that's a pretty mysterious part of this episode. As said, it's a power move. Killing someone just to bring them back to life sends a message. We can get to you, and we can take you out. The mystery, at least for me, is what Price is actually up to. We have to imagine that he's trying to put a squad together to go up against Whiterose and the Dark Army, rather than delivering this as a message for her. That would seem to align his goals with Elliot's, so why would he go through such great lengths to get in touch with him? I guess we'll have to wait and see what Price has up his sleeve, since technically he's still under Whiterose's thumb, and it isn't clear here if he's the one who fed the name Garson or if Whiterose would have been the one to do that. There was a lot to like in this episode, and the table is certainly set. The show's always been great looking, and I really like the way they sort of expanded things here. It felt like there were a lot of interesting panning shots, some handheld stuff that really added tension in different ways that I'm used to. Watching Mr. Robot and Elliot working together was a nice change of pace. It made the Grand Central scene work really well, and it sort of cracked me up when Mr. Robot took over so seamlessly when Elliot was talking to Darlene and he was just done with it. We can clearly see that Elliot's in a different headspace. Freddie Lomax is nobody in the grand scheme of things, but his whole sequence was important. I mean, it served as more than just an opportunity to call back to the opening of the series where Elliot hacks and turns in a pedophile. Elliot plays a role in this man's death, and it barely makes him pause to consider the implications of what he's doing. He's on a mission to take down Whiterose, and in his words, he's done with the therapy sessions. Things are dire, and there is a literal timer on his life. We also have a little bit of humor in here as well, especially with Janice. I like the stuff with Dom's mom, the little back and forth, the macaroni and gravy, but there was also the flat earth stuff they slipped in there at Angela's whenever Darlene's there. So it wasn't completely 100% dark. I liked Janice, the character, and I liked the way they introduced her, how well she played the part of an unassuming Dark Army enforcer. There's a lot of potential there. Obvious parallels to Irving's character, who we haven't heard any word of to this point. We have to imagine that Dom and Darlene are going to come back around. They're going to get themselves straightened out somewhat over the next couple episodes because time is of the essence. With time counting down, we have to imagine that a lot of these are going to be like episodes that are going to be short windows of time. This should be really the only time jump that we get. To me, this whole idea of Elliot only being useful until the project moves, and that in turn being an expiration date for him, makes a lot of sense in bringing the story to a conclusion. In a sense, it doesn't matter what Whiterose's project does anymore because Elliot's going to be eliminated if it makes it to the Congo. Of course, Elliot is at a point he doesn't care what it does. He still wants to take out Whiterose no matter what, and one of them has to go down. I thought this made it feel like a nice simplification, and it was effective in nullifying a lot of the far out and sci-fi theories. I mean, people have them. People are going to continue to have them. People are going to guess that Angela isn't really dead and that something different happened rather than what we saw happen to Elliot with the overdose. But overall, things got more focused and simplified in the stakes and what Elliot is trying to accomplish. With the 5/9 hack, he found out that the top 1% of the 1% was the best suited to retain their power and even profit off of the misery that everybody else experienced in that situation. Mr. Robot pointed this out to him. He said, this used to be about changing the world. Now you're trying to get back. And yeah, I'm sure that this is going to take some twists and turns, but it all ends in a showdown between Whiterose and Elliot. I think Whiterose's project is going to be like something for leverage to try to get Elliot to change sides, but I don't think that the weight of it all is necessarily what's going to make the end of this interesting. We'll have to wait and see, though. I did look around a little bit after the episode before I started working on this, and I saw people were jumping to sci-fi theories, which that happens every time, and people have some good ideas, but I didn't get that vibe from this at all. That's not where my head went. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. What'd you think about the first episode? It was strong. I enjoyed it. The fact that it's a table setting episode takes away a little bit. Like, it doesn't put it up in the top of the top episodes of all time, but it did its job, and there was definitely some crazy moments. The Sam Esmail cameo was fun. I hope we get to see a lot of him actually in the rest of this season. I'm really curious as to what Price will get up to, how that will play out, how long Elliot's going to keep us shut out, what's going to bring him back around. And yeah, just let me know what you guys think in the comments. Let me know what questions you have about what happened in episode 1, season 4, what theories you have about the season going forward. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I'll be doing episode recaps throughout the season. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.